Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and with me, as always, is your other co-host, John. But, John, we have a very special guest today. We have JR here from the Big Ten Huddle. You probably already know him from the Big Ten Huddle, and also JR's rankings. JR, good to have you.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it. I heard there might be some SEC slander tonight, and I'm always up for that. So as much as I'm here for the Buckeye talk, I'm here for the SEC slander too. Let's do it.
We try to do it at least once a show.
Yeah.
I feel
it's so easy.
Yeah, we feel like that's important. So we will get to that in the news. So as always, folks, this is our preview series. If you haven't caught the last ones, please go back and you can check out our Wisconsin, Illinois, and Minnesota previews. But tonight, as you may have guessed by our respective gear that JR and I have on, we're talking about the Ohio State Buckeyes, the reigning national champions. Mm-hmm. And JR is both, covers the whole Big Ten, but also is a hardcore Buckeyes fan. So JR, just to start off, how'd you get into, your podcasting? Tell people where they can find you and just a little bit about your love of the Big Ten.
Yeah, so when I first started podcasting, I was just looking for something to talk about in the college football realm, and I've always, been a Buckeye fan and always kind of, I wouldn't say I had a soft spot for the Big Ten or anything, but it was always a conference I watched the most, and I appreciated the ball that was played in the Big Ten. I like that Ohio State kind of had their own niche, I guess you could say, or unique aspects of what they did, but overall in the Big Ten, things were pretty similar with with all the teams, and so just naturally got into the Big Ten, joined a group called Big Banter Sports, and that went away, and then I went with the College Huddle, and so we're still kind of with them, and then we got picked up by Believe, the podcasting network there, so we're rocking and rolling, moving on with things, and just really glad to be able to podcast and talk the Big Ten.
Yeah, and JR, not only I gotta toot his horn for him, he won't do it. Not only does he cover football, as well as anybody around, he's one of the best for sure, and I always watch his show, but he also covers, at your channel, you also cover basketball. So you got the Big Ten kind of covered in the revenue sports.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Basketball, not as much in the off season, just because, let's be honest, there's not as much news going on for basketball in the off season. And the thing I always hate is you don't have the schedule for basketball until like a few months before. Like, if there's anything I could change, don't get me wrong, I am not for scheduling games 10 years ahead of time in football. I think we could get rid of that. That's fine. But in basketball, if they could give us the schedule like a year before the season starts or something like that, it'd make my life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. I hear you on that. Well, and you guys were bonding just before we got on. It's a scorching day across the country here, and you gentlemen are both homeowners, and we're doing some yard work. So I'm glad you both made it. You both stayed hydrated, I hope, and can make it through this episode despite, really laying it out there today.
It was hot. It was really hot. That's for sure today. And it was not a day that I think JR and I wanted to go out and mow the lawn and do a bunch of yard work. I sure wasn't in favor of it, but you got to do what you got to do.
No, I did it all today, man. I was out there in the flower beds. We had some tree branches fall down from a storm the other day, and so I was cutting up the tree branches and everything. The only thing I didn't burn them. So that was the one thing that I had on the list. I was like, it's 95 degrees outside. I'm not burning anything today. The sun can take care of it.
A wise discretion is the better part of valor, more often than not.
True.
All right. Well, JR, I know your time is limited, so let's jump right into the news. And John, why don't I let you introduce the first thing, because you texted me about this, and I thought you were just messing with me at first. I was like, this can't be something they're actually talking about.
Yeah, well, there's a thing that has destroyed other conferences before and is apparently now being talked about. Not saying, I don't know how strongly considered, but it is being discussed. And rumor has it somewhat seriously, of a thing called unequal revenue sharing within the Big Ten Conference. Something you and I have talked about before on the podcast, and our thoughts on it. Obviously, you and I are both vehemently against such a thing. It's just not what the Big Ten has been built on. There's a lot more that goes into it as well, other than football and athletics, which a lot of people don't know, including the national media seem to forget. about what the Big Ten and the SEC, frankly, in different ways and maybe to a lesser degree, but still. And so that's something that a lot of people kind of miss when they talk about this. They look at it strictly from a football perspective, which is understandable, but also I think you need to add in the nuance, which is what we're here to do. So.
Yeah, I think JR, I really want to hear your take on it. I'll just say going into it, the strength of the Big Ten is how competitive it is from top to bottom. Iron sharpens iron. That's real. I truly believe winning the last 2 national titles, having the historic success the Big Ten has had both recently and over time, I think revenue sharing has been part of that because programs, it gives them a chance to build themselves up. It gives everyone a chance to be really competitive. And the big schools are still making $1 bajillion. So it seemed like it's sort of a rising tide that lifts all boats kind of thing. But JR, maybe you think it differently. I'm curious as to your take.
Yeah, so I see both sides of it a little bit more. So I get where we're coming from now, right? Everybody is trying to scrounge up $20.5 million every year to pay their rosters. And let's just be honest, and I've said this on the Big Ten Huddle before, I don't think every Big Ten team is going to pay $20.5 million to their athletics every single season. Now, will they do it the majority of time? Yeah, I think so. But let's be honest, there are Major League Baseball teams out there that are paying, 5% of what the big dogs are paying because that's their strategy in order to work up to being able to go after those, World Series or pennants, whatever they're going towards. I'm not a baseball fan anymore, so I don't know if it's changed or not. But anyway, you get what I'm saying, right? Like there is a strategy element to this that some teams will pay less at certain times and other teams will pay more at other times. And so while I'm not so much in favor of like what the ACC did, I think that was not very intelligent, but I don't really think much of what the ACC does is very intelligent.
Yeah.
I can also see where Ohio State fans and where Penn State fans are coming from, where it's like, if we're going to be put on big noon kickoff so often that our fans and our, recruiting is going to suffer because of all these noon games rather than the night games. I mean, as an Ohio State fan, guys, it gets old. Like I like watching noon games, don't get me wrong, on TV, but I have no desire to go to a game at noon in the Horseshoe. I just don't. I don't live super close, but still, even if I was around, I would have no desire to go to a game at noon. It's way too early. I got kids. If I'm going to go out and tailgate, I don't want a sausage and egg sandwich every single time for a tailgate. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want that. So I get it, but at the same time, it could absolutely ruin the conference. You see what's happening with the ACC, the arguments that Clemson and Florida State are getting into. The only solution I can conjure up in my mind, and I'm not even saying I like this, I see both sides, and I think there probably does need to be something done. Maybe if you are playing on one of the bigger kickoffs, like a big noon kickoff, or maybe on CBS or something, maybe you get like a boost for that game or something like that. But like maybe everybody has the same baseline they get. But if you're getting drafted to go play for, because that's what it is, right? It's a draft by the TV companies. If you're getting drafted, you'll play big noon kickoff. Maybe they gotta be prepared to pay those teams an extra $5 million or something like that. Again, I'm not really saying I'm in favor of it, but I see where they're coming from, and I do think that there is truth to some teams are a part of the reasoning for why these companies like Fox, CBS, and NBC are signing the Big Ten more so than other companies. Like, I love Northwestern, don't get me wrong, but we don't have hardly anybody that watches our podcast from Northwestern because they just don't have the fans for it, right? Yeah. No, they're not buying the Big Ten so they can put Northwestern games on NBC. It just doesn't happen. They're buying the Big Ten so that way they can put Ohio State, Michigan, the big rivalry games of Minnesota, Wisconsin, or whatever else. Like they're putting those games on TV because those are the ones that get the most viewers. And I can see where people are coming from saying, or the schools are coming from saying, if we're going to play all these games on this time when we don't want to play, we got to see a little bit extra for it.
See, I would like to see pushback and just make a rule that there's only so many games you can play in one time slot. Because it does seem totally unfair to Ohio, like, not to get off topic, but it does seem totally unfair to Ohio State. And I'm not sure. And I actually, friend of the pod, Phil, can't stand Gus. Now, I like Gus Johnson, but he can't stand Gus Johnson. And he told me, he's like, I'm tired of it. He's like, he's like trying to find like streams of local broadcasts so he doesn't have to listen to Gus Johnson. And I'm just like, and I get it having the same people, the same broadcast team, the same time slot, the same kind of thing. That's frustrating. So I really wish they could limit that. We kind of have the opposite problem, JR, where we have too many night games now, which I'm not like mad about it, but it's weird.
I'm an old man, so I like to go.
No, I know you're mad about it.
but it is kind of weird though, because you know, both of us some days you don't want to wait all day to see your game. Like you either do, like, you know, kind of like you have sometimes you have things going on at night that you want to go do, or you're meeting up with friends for dinner or something like that, and you don't want to miss anything. But I understand and I agree. I think that there should be the game should be split up as far as time slots more equally. It just,
I don't understand. I don't think it would hurt the ratings either.
No,
because I think people are going to show up for the big games they're going to watch because those are the big games they want to watch, and they will mostly work their schedules around that. You know, and you'll lose or gain some fans, you know, based on people's schedules, but whatever. You're going to end up in about the same spot. So I think the networks are making a mistake by pigeonholing Ohio State in that big noon slot. And so I do hope they fix that. And the unequal revenue sharing, you know, that could be a whole podcast. So I think we should switch topics before either John or I get really upset. All right. Let's talk. We got to briefly discuss the Wisconsin-Miami saga. I mean, Wisconsin is guns blazing, and the Big Ten is behind them, and they're really going to court on this. And I did not think, man, I thought it was all posturing. I really did not think it was going to get this far. So, JR, right away, what do you think of it?
I mean, I'm in favor of it. Listen, we need some rules around here. We need something going on where people are actually being held accountable for what's happening. Now, I'm not going to act like Ohio State is completely blameless and everything. You and I have talked about this, Mike.
Yes.
Like, Ohio State goes out there and tampers too, but guess what? Every program does. I say it all the time. I say, if you think your program isn't tampering, then you have no idea what's going on in college football. Every program does it. Now, some teams are a little bit more out there than other teams are, and they're being more aggressive than other teams are. There are programs out there that are tampering with, like, FCS schools. You know, nobody cares about that. And quite frankly, the FCS programs probably kind of know their place a little bit to where they get it. Like, this guy has a really good season. He's probably going to go off.
PJ's made a killing on those guys.
Right. Like, it sucks. Don't get me wrong, but these guys, like, they recognize it. They see what's going on here. And so should it stop? Yes, it should stop. Is it the worst thing in the world? No, there's plenty worse things going on in college football. But when you have a player that you genuinely think, okay, he signed his contract, he's coming back, everything's going on here, and then he has I mean, I don't know if it was actually verified as being a fake excuse or whatever about the family member. I really try to tread lightly around that stuff because I just don't know what goes on. But it's been used so many times in college football and college basketball. Like, oh, I can't do this because of this, or I can't do this because of this. And it's just like, if we could just get schools to actually invest in the players they have, stick around. If you don't like the school, that's one thing. Just come out and say it. Just be honest. But if you're going to come out here and try to have all these excuses about this, that, and the other, just so that way you can go someplace else and get paid more, like, all right, then you shouldn't have never signed the contract. Right? Like, these, I get these are 18, 19-year-old kids, but there has to be some more accountability. And at the end of the day, it's the NCAA's fault because the NCAA never actually put rules in place about agents. Right? This is something me and Zach harp on all the time. The NCAA should have put a rule in place that only certain people could be agents. Now, we get pushback from it at times where people are like, well, your NCAA can't do that much. I get that everybody thinks that just like everything is free market and everybody can do whatever they want. Like, the NFL has rules. Like, the NCAA should have rules. Like, they should have gone to court, got some of these things put together. Maybe you don't get collective bargaining, but I mean, maybe we'll talk about it later. Like, there's rules right now from a federal judge that signed something that everybody just thinks is going to go away. Do I think it's going to go smoothly? And I know we'll get to this in a second, so I'm not trying to harp on it. Do I think it's going to go smoothly? No. But the fact that a federal judge signed it, do I think that there's some weight there? Yeah, I think there is. And something similar should have been happening long before with the NCAA. They should have seen this coming. They should have protected the kids. And really, that's what pisses me off more than anything. They didn't protect the kids. These are 18, 19-year-old kids. They need protection. And let's be honest, these parents are shoveling so much money into these kids being able to play athletics and get themselves. These families are in tons of debt.
Oh, yeah.
It ain't cheap. I got 2 kids right now. One's 2, one's 3. The 3-year-old's starting sports already. I'm not saying we're going into debt by paying for, gymnastics camp or anything like that, but I see how much it is now. It's only going to keep getting more and more. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
100%. Well, and the thing is too, like what we have to keep in perspective here is what's changed is that these, do you call them student athletes anymore? Are they paid athletes? Are they professionals? Are they semi-pro? These, again, talking about how we need to clear the lines of what is this, what all of this is for people, including the parents and the players and everyone involved, so that we can start to make these rules and these guidelines and start implementing them correctly. So otherwise it's still the Wild West, and it's incredibly frustrating for everybody involved. I understand the frustration from Wisconsin fans and from, I'm sure the university itself, that this all happened and how it all went down. I would be frustrated and pissed off too if this were the case, considering also we've heard that, Xavier Lucas is doing very well in Miami. So
looks like the best player on their defense, apparently,
yeah.
are the reports.
Yeah, so that's rough.
Yeah, the thing that Wisconsin did, and I can't believe they did it after Caden Proctor did it, is the rumors I hear from people who are connected to the Wisconsin program, like our pal, friend of the pod, Scooby, is that they paid Lucas, that Wisconsin paid him, and that he took the money and ran. And if that happened, that's outrageous, right? Like, you can't be doing that. And also, who's paying up front at this point with NIL? You'd think, fool me once, shame on, you know what I mean? Like that kind of, I'm just shocked that that's, that teams are still doing that, if that's true, and they are still doing that. But yeah, regardless, you can't, the tampering is frustrating. But like, I don't think there's really a solution. We can talk all we want.
Yeah.
I'm going to maintain, I don't think there's a solution until we have a collective bargaining agreement and actual buyouts. So guys, so if guys do want to leave and another team takes them, they pay for them, and you can take that money and go try to, go replace that player.
Yeah.
Until we have that in place, I don't know how you stop this. But in the meantime, I do love that it's Wisconsin putting their necks out there. I'm sitting here eating popcorn, and I'm enjoying that aspect of it, because I don't know. Is it going to go for them? Is it going to blow up in their face? Does it matter? Does it hurt their reputation either way as a player-friendly school? I don't know. These are just thoughts. But, so I'm really interested to see where this goes, and I truly didn't think it would come this far.
Well, to be honest, what I think is most interesting about this in a way is, and this is, you talked about Wisconsin putting their neck out there, but this is being backed by the Big Ten, and the fact, and like that's, which is, of course, and to me, if you were Miami, I don't know if, how much I would want to touch that if that were the case. You're having the whole Big Ten conference, and of course, like you already stated, JR, the ACC is, leaderless essentially.
Bonkers, what I call them.
Yeah.
Bonkers.
Absolutely. But what also is very intriguing to me, to kind of pivot a little bit, is this is the first time we've heard from Tony Petitti in how long that this is a Big Ten. This is a statement from the Big Ten, and he has not said anything over, and I know this is moving a little bit to the college football playoff and everything in general, but he has been silent. And I understand he comes from a different world than Greg Sankey. But I also think that your job is to speak on behalf of your conference and to at least show that you have some kind of stance on something. It doesn't have to be a lot, but to show something that you have a voice. And I'm a little concerned about that. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, JR.
Yeah, I kind of get pulled both ways with the Tony Petitti talking and stuff like that, because on one hand, like, I think Greg Sankey looks like a total moron right now, talking to the media and everything about, like, I'm gonna strength the schedule, and it's like, dude, you're using metrics from 10 years ago when you guys were still paying players and nobody else was. Like, this is getting ridiculous at this point that you're trying to do this. And then also on top of that, I also see the benefit of getting the media on your side. I think it was you I was talking with on under one of Adam Rittenberg's tweets, John, where it's like, I see what they're doing. As somebody who has gone to Big Ten media days before, like, there is an aspect of treat the media right, and hopefully they have a good, thought process about you. Hopefully there's, some, not, I wouldn't say bias, but just some like good vibes about you to them coming off of that kind of stuff. They do try to really serve the media in those scenarios. And so if you're able to influence the media's thought process about your league, then that's ultimately good for you, because who runs the AP poll? It's the media. Where does the college football playoff committee get their basis for their rankings? The AP poll. It's every single, like, they always say, oh, we're not going to base anything off it. And then they come out and there's like 3 differences between the college football playoff rankings and the AP poll. And it's like, yeah, okay, you didn't do anything different. But that, like, so I do see the benefit in that. But at the same time, like Ross Bjork was just talking the other day, the athletic director for Ohio State, and he was saying, why would we talk to the media about this stuff? They're not making any decisions. I get that. But at the same time,
there's a court of public opinion.
Right. Like there is a clear bias that happens for the SEC that does not happen for the Big Ten. Look last year, Tennessee and Indiana. Tennessee got a whole game lead over Indiana. Didn't matter that Tennessee lost 2 games. Indiana lost 1 game, and everybody wanted them out of the playoffs. Nobody was arguing Tennessee shouldn't have been in the playoffs. In fact, everybody was arguing that Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss should have been in the playoffs with 4 losses.
Like, and then they all lost.
Exactly. Well, Ole Miss, I think, beat Duke.
No, Ole Miss won, but South Carolina and Alabama
beat
went
an
out and
ACC
lost.
school. Anyway, the bonkers conference. Anyway, but that's where I'm getting at with it is like I do think the Big Ten could benefit by doing a little bit of better job of catering to the media and trying to get some more influence there. But at the same time, I don't want them going and handing out entire booklets on like SEC strength of schedule. That's just embarrassing.
No, and I don't think that's necessary either. Like I said, I think just a little bit of a, some public words from Petiti just in general, just to kind of soothe some feathers would go a long way. And so that's kind of where my thought is. And honestly, at this point, the way I look at it, considering the SEC's cowardice to go to nine conference games, which it is, there is no one who can convince me otherwise that it's anything but that. Is the supervillains of college football at this point in time are Greg Sankey and Pete Bavacqua from Notre Dame, because like it's those are the 2 that are holding up everything. And the reason, at this point in time, the reason Notre Dame is supporting the SEC staying at 8 is because if they go to 9, it will more than likely push Notre Dame to have to eventually or sooner than later join a conference as well. So they're in cahoots with each other at this point in time, in my opinion. I don't have any evidence to that, but it sure seems like that's a strong possibility.
Well, and what kills me, John, is that the Big Ten regularly gets criticized for not playing big out-of-conference games when they're already playing 9 conference games. Now, don't get me wrong. Me and you were talking about this, Mike. I want to see more big out-of-conference games. I want to see more big games in general because I would rather watch Ohio State play Texas than watch them play, South Dakota State. No offense, South Dakota State. I just would rather see Texas, okay? Sure. But you get, like... it does hold up the Big Ten from playing some of these big out-of-conference games, but the national perception is, Indiana's schedule is weak because they're playing 3 cupcake out-of-conference games. Meanwhile, you look at Georgia, Mississippi State, all these other schools, and they're only playing 9 Power 2, Power 4 games as well. Indiana's playing a full Big Ten schedule. Now, is it their fault that they basically drafted the entire bottom of the Big Ten last year? No, that's not their fault.
But that's part of the magic of college football, and it always has been. It always has been, and they want to rewrite it like having that season isn't something you aspire to, even if you're not going to win a national title. Like, that's not a big part of the mystique of the whole sport. Yeah, we could go on and on about this, guys. I think we should move because, time is limited. But, John, I see you there. But
I love this. I love hating on the SEC just as much as you.
Well, we're going to hate on them right now a little more.
Okay.
So I noticed something. I was listening, and I'm going to call him out by name because we're real on this podcast. I was listening to Split Zone Duo, and they were talking about the potential that the House settlement would make it so NIL collectives are brought to heel, and suddenly the NIL is going to be kept under control. And is this going to be the return of bagmen? And wouldn't that be so great? And I'm just thinking to myself, you guys really want to go back to before 2023. You really do, but you can't. NIL has leveled the playing field. The transfer portal has leveled the playing field, and you're not putting that Pandora back in its box, because even if you get them to say we're gonna limit some certain things aren't legitimate NIL, that's gonna get challenged in court immediately, and they're gonna lose. They're gonna lose because you can't. There's no way to argue someone's not worth what somebody's willing to pay them. So. But I just think it's funny that all these, and it's not the only podcast I heard. It's just the one that they hold themselves up. So as being sort of the thinking man's podcast. So I'm going to put them on blast for being a little lazy and ridiculous here. And I just think all these podcasts that are like, oh, if the Bagman came back, we go back to where the only rosters we needed to know was Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. And that's it. And it'll just be those 4 teams every year and nothing else. They really want that back, I feel like, because it's less work for them. That's my thought, the media types. They like the 4-team playoff. They didn't have to think about as much stuff, didn't have to research as many teams. Now, all of a sudden, we've got these wide open playoff scenarios, all these teams in consideration. It's a lot more work for them.
Well, and the thing I don't get is, like, the Bagman's been out. Like, what are we talking about? The Bagman's been here. It's just had the label of NIL. Like, every school now is getting their Bagman to donate to the NIL. Now,
yes,
we'll see what happens moving forward. I think we're in a very crazy time of college football right now, because you have certain schools like Penn State, Ohio State, and I'm talking like, top tier contenders every year.
Yeah.
Georgia even is being like this, where it seems like they are going to comply with these house settlement rules because they think like, this is going to be enforced and this is going to be a thing. I tend to believe, a federal judge signed it, so it's not just going to go away right away. Could it over time? Sure, I guess, but I feel like they do have a bit of a standing there rather than just like, this is what the NCAA decided, and golly gee, we're going to go with it and hope it goes well. So I do think there's more standing with that in the fact that it's the College Sports Commission and not the NCAA. If this was the NCAA running it, I'd be like, yeah, it's gone. Don't even worry about this. But at the same time, like, it's possible we get back to that kind of undercover Bagman thing, but I think there's also, from how they're talking, there's also going to be much stricter penalties if that kind of stuff does happen. I mean, like, guys, they're talking about like kicking schools out of conferences at this point. Like, there's real talk about Tennessee could get kicked out of the conference if they don't comply. I mean, Michigan right now, the state of Michigan is trying to say they don't have to comply with some of this stuff. Do they get kicked out too? I mean, I don't know. Like, it seems like they have much more heat on their punishments than maybe what the NCAA, because I mean, we're going to see it with the Michigan scandal and everything. Like, Michigan's going to lose some scholarships. They're going to be on a longer probation, and they're going to get some show causes. We'll see what happens to Sharon Moore. But they're not going to get a postseason ban, I don't think. They might get some wins vacated, but who cares? We all saw it happen. At this point, 2 or 3 years later, who cares what these punishments are? They're not actually going to affect anything. And everybody just thinks, oh, well, we can't do anything, because of the new players there. And it's like, well, in my opinion, you signed up to go there when you knew they were in trouble. So that's your point.
I love that we've already taken a curve into let's punish Michigan. This is the kind of Buckeye content I am here for. And I sympathize with what you're saying. Like, I think it's going to be hard, but yeah, you can't just let teams get away with breaking all the rules.
Well, then everybody's going to do it, right? Like, if you just don't punish teams, it's like, well, why do we have to follow the rules,
Yep.
My only fear is, what if they say the fan NIL isn't legit, and programs like Minnesota that follow too many rules, all of a sudden our collectives are not as effective because we're limited in how much money they can disperse. That would be, because I think that's what's scared. I think, honestly, I don't think it's like Ohio State and Penn State and Oregon and Michigan that have scared the SEC teams. I think they knew they were coming. I think what scared them is all these upper middle class and middle and upper middle class Big Ten teams who have 45,000 undergraduates every year, who have hundreds of thousands of interested living alumni, who suddenly they can all donate, and that makes them upset. So I feel like my big fear would be, do they make that illegal, but somehow make it so, and then the bagmen come back, and so I just hope we're not that there's no chance of that happening. And I feel like the players are going to fight for open NIL because they've seen the promised land. I feel like the players themselves are going to fight for it. So I don't know. But JR, you're right. It's a federal judge. It's going to have teeth. It's going through Deloitte, all that stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. It could go a lot of ways.
The other part of it, I don't think everybody gets, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, Mike, is like, I hear a lot of people talking like, well, the CSC, the College Sports Commission, is going to tell this guy that he can't earn this much money. And like, I see where people are going with that, but they're not saying that. What they're saying is you can't play college football if you are above fair market value, go ahead, pay the kid if you want to pay him. But guess what? If he's not in college football, he's not worth nearly as much because
Sure.
he's not going to be on television every single day or every single game like he would be with us. I kind of relate it to a little bit. It's not exactly this way, but a little bit to, if you don't meet grades, you can't play football, right? Now we don't see that a whole lot, but in reality, that could happen if a guy gets his grades low enough. Nobody's saying you have to get these grades or else. Everybody's just saying, look, if you want to play college football, you have to have these grades. Sounds like a similar thing is happening here. I say sounds like because I don't know exactly how it works yet. We'll have to see it in action first, but it sounds like it's a similar thing to say you can make all this money if you want to. Go ahead, pay him whatever you want to pay him. But if you're above fair market value and it's just pay for play, they're going to be ineligible and they can't play. We'll just have to see how it works out. I don't know. I don't know how it'll work out. I don't see it exactly as you can't pay this guy money,
Yeah. No, those are really good points, JR. Appreciate that. All right. Well, let's get into talking about the Buckeyes. So 2024-25 goes down as a dream season for Ohio State. Congratulations, JR, to you and all the Buckeye fans out there watching on the national title run. What a ride it was. Back in January, we watched the confetti fall. You claimed yet another national title, Ohio State's third this century. And what struck me about this title run was the highs and the lows of it, right? Like heartbreaking losses to Oregon and Michigan cost Ohio State a shot at a Big Ten title. They sort of backed their way into the playoff, licking their wounds a little bit after their humiliating Michigan loss, favored by 3 touchdowns. And at one point, Ohio State this year had 3 consecutive close games, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we're talking about Ohio State and a now legendary team here. In 1-score wins, the loss to Oregon, and then the 1-score wins over Nebraska and Penn State. So this team was excellent, but they didn't always look like the national champs. And then they came out and just dominated the playoff, crushed Tennessee into powder, shellacked Oregon immediately. Oregon was out of that game almost before it started, beat Texas in a very competitive game. And then, the Notre Dame game got close, but it wasn't really close. It was 31-7, and you let your foot off the gas too early and start celebrating a national title. But I mean, what was that like to not only to take home the natty, but to have it be such a relatively up and down for being a title season?
It was miserable until the playoffs. I mean, it was awesome. Don't get me wrong, beating Penn State, and it was fun beating Indiana. But like, those are games that like you expect to win those. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful of Penn State fans. It's just Ohio State fans have gotten used to it. Right. And I'm sure Penn State fans would say at a certain point, the loss to Ohio State doesn't hurt as much because, it happens more often than it doesn't. And so you kind of get used to it a little bit. Same thing on the winning side. And so if you lose that game, it's going to hurt a whole heck of a lot more. And then obviously with Oregon, like that one hurt even more because Oregon was really battling with you and recruiting the entire time leading up to the season. And then you get to the season and Oregon doesn't look so good. And then they beat you and you're like, this team that didn't look so good against Boise State and who'd they play? Idaho or something.
I played Idaho really close. Yeah,
exactly. And so those 2 games really make you think like, okay, are we really that good? Then you get the Penn State win. You're feeling better, but you also knew that things could have been better. Like you could have won that game by more points, but you didn't. And then the whole Michigan game, that just kind of was like, what was the season even for? Like, sure, we're going to the playoffs, but we might beat Tennessee, but we got Oregon next. Or, we might beat Oregon, but then we got Texas after that. Like all these big games, if we can't beat Oregon, if we can't beat, the team up north in their worst state ever, I mean, they were 20-point favorites in that game. You're starting to question everything about the team in a season where everybody went into it saying this team's going to win the national championship. It was up, down, up, down, up, down. And then you get to the playoffs. And then, I mean, I remember I watched that first playoff game against Tennessee with my dad, and we both just sat back in our chairs and we were like, they're going to do this, aren't they? And my dad was like, don't let me believe. He's like, I'm going to get hurt so much more if you let me believe. And then when they beat Oregon, it was like, okay, team of destiny. Like, this has to happen now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. That had the same feeling. Absolutely.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed, and I'll just go on it briefly because we're not, this isn't a scheme podcast, but after running inside zone for the last 40 years, Chip Kelly abandoned it after the Michigan game, scrapped it, stopped running it. and went to a bunch of counter and gap scheme stuff and was like, I'm going to get my running backs in space however I can. And like, I don't think I can remember a team, a title team, making a more dramatic schematic change so late in the season. Like, that wasn't due to injury or something, right? So I don't know how I was so impressed with Chip. I just thought it was so ballsy, and Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, man, that was one for the ages.
Yeah, it's honestly one of the reasons why I'm still high on Ohio State this season. I know there's a lot of people out there with the narrative, and maybe this is what we'll start talking about next season a little bit, but there's a lot of people out there with the narrative of like, oh, Chip Kelly's gone. What are you going to do with your offense now? You got Brian Hartline and stuff. And I do think that there is obviously some questions to Brian Hartline. I didn't even have him in my top 3 of offensive coordinators in the Big Ten because we just don't know yet, right? Like we've seen him as a co-offensive coordinator was really good. We also saw him as an offensive coordinator by himself, and the offense was good, but it wasn't what Ohio State is used to seeing, right. And so there's some question marks there. However, it was still really good offense under Kyle McCord, even though he gets a lot of hate for that season, which I get it. I give him some hate too, so yeah, I can't say anything about it. But
he was pretty good for Cuse. Worked out well, kind of for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the thing that happened that was really interesting was after the season, Ryan Day started to talk about how much more he was actually involved with the offense because they didn't have all the political stuff going on of like trying to pander. He's basically said, I'm not going to pander to anybody. I'm not going to do recruiting. I'm not going to do transfer portal. Nothing's going to happen. I'm going to care about the guys in my building, and I'm going to go into the planning room, and I'm going to plan with Chip Kelly and Brian Hartline basically all day, every day. Nice. And that's what they did. And I think that made a huge impact, number one, on the run game with what Ryan Day wanted to do and what he saw worked during the season. And number two, them getting the ball to Jeremiah Smith more. I mean, you saw in that Oregon game how much more they were, trying to get the ball to him and in the Tennessee game too. But just overall, like, Ryan Day taking time away from recruiting, portal, stuff like that, and just saying, I'm going to be full in on the offense and help as much as I can. I think that was a huge part of making those adjustments and saying, okay, maybe we did it this year this way for all this year, but we're going to change things up now because this is what fits our players better.
I love that. Let's talk about the offense. Oh, sorry, John. Do you want to get in there?
Oh, I mean, I was just going to start.
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, speaking about Ryan Day, then, like, where do you think he goes from here? I mean, you get that national title. You've been close for how many years in a row, and now you finally get there. Like, what's the next step for Ryan Day?
Yeah, it's interesting. The story that I go back to every time when people talk about this is, I think it was the first press conference after they won the national championship. Ryan Day he was kind of like loose. He was kind of like leaning back, talking to the guys. And he had his hands up in front of his face, and he seemed so much more casual. And so probably like the 6th or 7th question in, one of the reporters was like, Ryan, you seem a lot more relaxed. Like, what's, and then he just kind of laughed, and he was like, you I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but he's like, you're darn right I'm relaxed.
Yeah, you can say it. You can curse. You're a guest.
He's like, you're damn right I'm relaxed. Like, I just won a national championship. That's what we needed for all this time. And so they were like, he was just kind of telling them, like, yeah, I feel much better about myself and the team and everything else. And then that's when we started to see Ryan Day become a lot more transparent about his team and everything else. Everybody talks about, and I'm sure you guys have heard about this or maybe talked about it on the podcast, at some point. Ryan Day was talking about the interior of the defensive line doesn't have the depth that he wants it to have. And so now everybody has kind of taken that and run with it this year and said, well, you got a new starting quarterback and your defensive line isn't very good. You're not going to be very good this season. And it's like, okay, that's not exactly what he said, number one. And number two, like, find me another head coach in the country that's willing to say, yeah, the depth of our defensive line isn't very good. Everybody needs more depth on their defensive line. Welcome to college football with the transfer portal open because defensive linemen go in there and just wish $1 million and they get $2 million because they're just that valuable. And so everybody needs more defensive line depth. Ryan Day, to me, is just one of the only ones talking about it and being open about it because that's how transparent he is. That's how open he's being, I guess, comfortable he is right now. I don't think he's actually comfortable, but he's more comfortable than he was last season.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine. And I think he's got to be sitting pretty right now. And obviously being one of the winningest coaches of, all time. I mean, like he's been doing so well, especially in college football right now. So I think the future looks bright, whatever that may be, whether he stays at Ohio State forever or he eventually looks at the NFL, whatever it happens to be. I think he's going to be successful. I have no worries about that. But I'm going to take over a little bit with the offense is kind of what we're going to talk about here now. And then Mike will go over the defense with you and what have you, but we'll kind of interject here and there. But, you talked a little bit about Brian Hartline and, this being, you talked about his experience and, taking over for Chip Kelly. Do you think his scheme is going to create like the same kind of scoring opportunities? Do you think his offense, is going to have the same kind of red zone efficiency without all that veteran leadership? And it's just, I guess, like, do you think there's going to be a regression? I'm just kind of curious of what your thoughts are. Obviously, we all know that Ohio State reloads. I'm not really worried about talent exactly. It's just varying degrees of elite. Let's just put it that way. Must be nice. But go a little bit more in depth, I guess, about Brian Hartline and what you expect with his scheme and play calling.
Yeah, I definitely think red zone is something that's probably going to get worse, and not just because of Brian Hartline, but you don't have Will Howard, right? Will Howard was a big, beefy dude that could run the ball, and in the red zone, he was able to score with running the ball a lot more. You saw it a lot during the season, and quite frankly, you don't have the running backs that you had last year in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Now, I think James Peoples and C.J. Donaldson are better than some people are giving them credit for, but they're obviously not those two guys, and so you probably will see a regression there. The thing that Ohio State fans is excited about with Brian Hartline is we feel like there is going to be more of an emphasis of getting the ball to Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and Brandon Ennis, which is something that frustrated a lot of fans last year because they started to get away from that. You had a very good, one of the best running back duos in Ohio State history last year, but you also had the best freshman in Ohio State history. You also had, the best statistical leader in Ohio State history at wide receiver in Emeka Ibuka, and it just felt like they weren't getting those guys the ball enough sometimes. And that Nebraska game, it felt that way, and that Michigan game, it felt that way, and so that frustrated fans. And so I do think there is going to be more of an emphasis put on throwing the ball in more favorable situations to Jeremiah Smith. I can't tell you how many times I saw one guy on Jeremiah Smith last year at the beginning of the year or against Oregon or something like that, and they didn't go to him. Now they started doing that in the playoffs. That was a huge adjustment they made. But that kind of stuff does get the fans excited. Personally, I think red zone efficiency and stuff like that is so much more important. So I do think that's going to be an area where the offense decreases. But at the same time, we'll just have to see what happens. Julian Sayin is more fleet of foot than people give him credit for. He's just not that big dude like Will Howard is that can, jam it up the middle and get the first down or the touchdown for you.
Yeah, well, I was curious. Yeah, and since you just mentioned Julian Sayin, let's just move on to quarterbacks. Yeah, I mean, like, do you think he can match or exceed the production in a certain kind of way? I know he's not. You said he's not necessarily as mobile or what you would expect from Will Howard, but can he? What do you expect from that? His skill set, his accuracy and mobility, and like his leadership. How do you think that's going to translate over a full season? And if he struggles. Who do you think is going to back up? Who do you think is willing to or able to come in? Is it Lincoln Keenholz? Is he able to come on mid-season and be a solid option?
Yeah. So best way I can put it with Julian Sayin and that I've said so far is that he is more talented but less experienced than Will Howard. So you're going to get more talent, but you're also going to lose some experience there. The leadership and stuff like that is huge as well. That kind of stuff that Will Howard was able to bring was obviously a huge part of what they did last season. However, I do think that you are able to open the playbook up more. You are able to throw more deep passes. Will Howard really struggled on deep balls in the beginning of the season, and he still struggled later in the year. It's just that at times those guys were running so wide open that it didn't even matter. He was underthrowing balls, and they were still getting the ball because they had that much separation, which was great for him. But at the same time, I also think Julian Sayin has the best receiving core in all of college football. When you talk about Max Clare, what he was able to do at Purdue last year in an offense that really, really struggled, he was kind of the shining light of all of it. And then Jeremiah Smith in his second year, Carnell Tate in his third year, Brandon Ennis, he is great blocker. They actually considered him a leader on the team last year. Dude wasn't even starting. He was a sophomore, and they considered him a leader on the team last year. So there's a lot of thought about Brandon Inniss and what he can bring. And also, I mean, there's always guys in the wide receiver room for Ohio State. So there's guys behind them that could be very good as well. We'll see how that goes. But as far as I'm concerned, I think Julian Saint is going to have every weapon he needs to succeed. The offensive line, I think it's better than some people are giving credit for. I saw somebody the other day rank him like at the bottom half of the Big Ten, and I mean, there's too many returning guys. I just
three
can't
returning starters,
right? And the guy's reasoning was like Justin Fry is gone and this stuff, and like I get that, but like, and there's a lot of people concerned about Tyler Bowen because he hasn't coached offensive line in years. But one thing not a lot of people know is Ohio State has 4 offensive line coaches on their staff right now. They have Tyler Bowen, and they have 3 guys that were offensive line coaches at Power 4 programs. I think Purdue's offensive line coach last year, Oklahoma State's offensive line coach, and then there's one more. I can't remember the other one, but they have 4 former and current offensive line coaches on their staff, which I think is huge for getting your offensive line ready. And then on top of that, you got the transfer in Ethan Onyeonwa, and I mean, as you guys know, Philip Daniels and everything. So we'll see what happens there. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring that up.
So let's talk about.
I know that's a touchy one. I know that's a touchy one, guys.
No, but my question about Philip Daniels, I'll just interject here briefly, is does he start this year or did he ruin his career by transferring? I'm just kidding. I'm sure he's got 3 years of eligibility left. I'm sure he'll be fine regardless. But like, does he start this year?
I was going to say, I don't know if he starts this year. We'll see what happens. One thing that happened this offseason that I don't think they were expecting was the backup offensive lineman on the interior. His name's Austin Seierveld. He had just like apparently a phenomenal offseason. They give out these awards called Iron Buckeye Awards, which is like you were the best, most energetic, biggest leader in the weight room in the offseason. And him, Jeremiah Smith, and the returning linebacker, Sonny Styles. So everybody knows Jeremiah Smith and Sonny Styles. They win it. And then this kind of unknown offensive lineman to a lot of people, Austin Seierveld, wins it. And so somebody asked Ryan Day about him in the press conference, and he was like, yeah, he'll be a starter. They were like, what? And he was like, yeah, he'll start on the offensive line. They were like, where? He's like, we don't know where. He's just going to start. So apparently this guy that was kind of the backup last season has now elevated himself to second best offensive lineman on the team. And if you're looking at the guys who came back, it's probably right tackle, which is where Philip Daniels was supposed to play. I guess he could possibly move to right guard and Daniels could be at right tackle. We'll see, but it's very interesting. Ohio State's going to lose a lot of players on the offensive line next season. So if Daniels doesn't play this year, I think he'll probably play next year. But it's a very interesting situation. And then on top of that, Daniels came for Fry. You know, he was recruited by Fry to come into that room. You get a whole new offensive line coach. You know, that changes things.
Yeah. All right. Well, since that pretty much covers the offensive line, I guess, like we talked about that plenty here. But what I want to go a little bit more in depth on, like, what do you expect for the running back room? Like, I know that, you know, you're replacing 2 guys who just had a ton of production last year. And that's, you know, I know that, you know, Ohio State reloads, but like you know, can they replicate the combined like 1,600 plus rushing yards and 20 plus touchdowns? And like, do you think the offense is going to lose chunk plays in the run game? Like, I'm just curious. Like, do they have the same breakaway ability? You know, what are your expectations with these guys coming in to replace such monsters at running back?
Yeah, there's no Trevion Henderson in this running back room. You know, he was one and only Trevion Henderson, the way he was able to break off runs and do some of those things. I do think James Peoples is a much better running back than some people give him credit for. He is probably going to be the starter with C.J. Donaldson, the West Virginia running back, coming in to kind of back him up. Now, if you paid attention to West Virginia football at all, which I know, you know, we're mostly Big Ten here, so I don't know how many people did, but he was a huge guy. I mean, he was former tight end turned running back. That means you're a pretty big dude if you go from tight end to running back.
So since you brought him up right away, I'm curious. I heard that he was playing at 240 at West Virginia, but he's down to like 220, 225 at Ohio State. Like, there's the thought that he's going to be now just as powerful and now he's faster and oh boy.
My thought process, there's a lot of different opinions in the Ohio State fan base right now because we just don't know. My thought process is James Peoples will be the guy, and then CJ Donaldson will be more of that kind of third down option, kind of like pass blocker guy and kind of receiving back coming out of the backfield. Because you look at the history, he was a tight end, he was somebody that loved to hit people and loved to catch the ball. You put him in the backfield now, and what was one of Travion Henderson's best traits is that he was willing to hit people. I mean, he was one of the best pass protecting running backs that there was in college football last year. And so if CJ Donaldson can, read blitzes and do that like he was similar, I mean, it's not exactly the same. Obviously, you're on the line of scrimmage as a tight end, but if he can, try to read blitzes and block guys in the backfield and then also catch the ball coming out of the backfield because that's what he did as a tight end. He was catching the ball too. I would think that would be really beneficial for him. And I love the idea if he's gone down from 240 to 220, 225, something like that. Like, I think that makes him leaner. I don't think we'll see near the same amount of power to just run guys over like he did at West Virginia, but I also don't really think you need that. James Peoples is a very physical back. And then don't be surprised. There's a third guy in that room. Don't be surprised if by the end of it you guys hear about Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson, he looked really, really good in that spring game. I don't know if you guys watched that game.
Oh, I watched every snap.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was fantastic. Now he was going against like second string defense, so there is a little bit that
Yeah, but ball don't lie.
Right. I mean, his contact balance that he has, his just the way he's able to lower that head and hit somebody, but then also be able to juke somebody out of their shoes. I mean, he's got a promising future. He is a little injury prone. He was injured, I think, just about every year, if not one in high school. But when you got three guys carrying the rock back there, you can kind of make room for that.
Well, we talked a lot about the wide receivers as well. So I'm just going to kind of move along here since we, only have so much time. I want to hear just a little bit about the tight ends. You had Cade Stover, who had a lot of production. But what are the expectations with Max Clare? We've seen him and what he can do at Purdue, which he was pretty much their only offensive weapon last year, at least consistently. So what do you expect out of the tight end room here?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very deep tight end room for Ohio State, and it feels like every single tight end kind of has their role. So Max Clare, obviously the pass catching guy. It's a little interesting. There's a guy in the room named Jelani Thurman, former 5-star out of Georgia. Everybody was kind of expecting this to be his year, but they've been kind of expecting him to have his year since his freshman year, and it's just never really happened. So it's really interesting to see him not transfer out. I guess, in this day and age, you never want to wish a kid would transfer out, but you just kind of look at the room and you say, you think this guy would. So, I mean, Max Clare, he's probably going to play the majority of the passing snaps this season, and Jelani Thurman could possibly do some, but he has not looked like the pass catcher that Max Clare is in his career. And then you got some guys that are really good blockers behind him: Christian Bennett, Will Kazmarek, the dude from where was he at? Ohio, I think it was. Those are really good blockers, really good physical guys that are going to be able to be on the line of scrimmage and help there, and also possibly line up in the backfield a little bit like fullbacks a little bit too. I think Christian Bennett did that a little bit in his time when he was playing kind of at Ohio State in the more of a reserve role, but we'll see what happens there. I'm very interested to see what Brian Hartline does with the tight ends. Chip Kelly was very creative with them. We'll see if Brian Hartline has the same creativity or if they're just going to be inline guys that go run routes. We'll see.
Cool. All right.
Awesome. Should we talk defense, John? Are you good on offense?
I'm good. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I got to talk about, and I'm just going to get the elephant out of the room, right? Just address it right away. Defensive coordinator Matt Patricia, controversial hire for a number of reasons. In college, obviously a very long time ago in the 90s, he was accused of sexual assault and arrested. However, the charges ultimately were dropped when the victim decided not to testify. So that's, we should note all that. Started as an assistant OL coach, switched to defense under Bill Belichick with New England Patriots, coached linebackers, safeties, became DC, had great results, won 2 Super Bowls. Defenses were very good, ranking anywhere from 1st through 10th in the league during his time there. Then he became head coach of the Detroit Lions, and his defenses weren't very good. 16th, 26th, and 32nd. Ouch. So I guess my question is, you're Ohio State, you're Ryan Day, you're coming off a national title. You can have any coach just about in the country that you want. Why Matt Patricia?
Yeah, it's interesting. Matt Patricia was very, like you said, it was very back and forth with, the way Ohio State fans thought about him. I was indifferent. I said, you know what? He's got a good pedigree in the NFL, won some Super Bowls. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to question it too much. The Lions years do kind of, give me some concern. But at the same time, I've also seen guys be head coaches before and then go on and be really good coordinators after that. I mean, look at Tom Allen right now. Tom Allen produced a really good defense at Penn State after, he did okay for a couple years at Indiana, but he got fired.
Yeah.
And it needed to happen. So, the thing that Matt Patricia talks about with the Lions, and I preface all of this by saying, we don't know. Right? Like, we'll see what happens. He can give us every story in the book, and he can just try to make himself seem like a good guy. He seems like more jovial. He seems like somebody who is happier to be in the situation he is now than he was with the Lions. He's lost a bunch of weight. I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens. It could all be an act, or he could just be this really, fun, go lucky guy now. We'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, I think that the concern about the Lions stuff, isn't as much. He was in a number of podcasts talking about it. And he also told the media about how when he got to the Lions, he kind of treated the Lions like he was still with New England. Right? To where it was like, we're not satisfied with anything. We're going to, trying to basically do everything like Bill Belichick did. And, I mean, we've seen that with Josh McDaniels. We've seen that with all kinds of guys from the Patriots try to go someplace and basically be Bill Belichick. Well, the truth is Bill Belichick is Bill Belichick because only Bill Belichick can be Bill Belichick, right? And we're seeing how that works out at North Carolina right now. We'll see how the season goes, but I don't think it's going to go well.
Neither do we.
If they get to the season. If he gets there.
Yeah. They've been really quiet lately. I think that's the best thing that happened.
Yeah. For sure.
But I have optimism, but I'm not going to be fully bought in until I kind of see it this year. The thing I'm excited about is that I do think that this team would benefit by going to more of a 3-3 or a 3-4 in the front seven type of, or front six, whatever you want to call it, type of deal. And I think that Matt Patricia would be able to do that better than Jim Knowles would. And then the other side of this, and this gets talked about a little bit, but Larry Johnson and Jim Knowles did not get along at all.
You're
I
right.
mean, they there was no love lost there when Jim Knowles moved on. Neither of them will talk about it, in front of the media or anything, because they're both respectable guys who don't want to cause any drama. And for the record, I still like Jim Knowles. I'm not totally against him like some other Buckeye fans are. I get the revenge. Like, I want to beat Penn State too because there's some revenge factor there. But at the end of the day, like, I don't hate Jim Knowles or anything. He went home and found himself another job. And so I do think that there is more respect that Larry Johnson has for Matt Patricia to where he would listen to him more. But again, this is all stuff we see before the season. We'll see how it actually plays out during the year.
Well, I know we don't have a ton of time, and we want to get to the schedule game, which is my favorite thing. So we'll talk briefly about each of the position groups here. D-line, Buckeyes return 0 starters with stalwarts like Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimalu off to the NFL. However, Ohio State has a combination of homegrown and portal guys to take their place. I've got starters listed as defensive ends Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, and defensive tackles Edric Houston, Caden McDonald. So correct me where I'm wrong. Let me know if there's anyone else you see contributing a lot up front. And what kind of role do we see for CJ Hicks? Is he going to be an edge rusher on passing downs up front, or a little bit, or what do you think with him?
Yeah, CJ Hicks is the question mark at this point because he's not a linebacker, but he's also not a defensive end. He's just not big enough for it, and he doesn't have Abdul Carter like traits where he can kind of get away with being a little bit smaller. So we'll see what happens with CJ Hicks. That's going to be a really interesting one. If anything, he'll probably be like a specialized edge rusher on third downs, I think possibly. Bo Atkinson, I think, will start instead of Caden Curry. I think you'll probably see Bo Atkinson on
the North Carolina transfer.
Yeah, the North Carolina transfer. I think you'll probably see him and Kenyatta Jackson out there together, but I think you nailed it on Caden McDonald and Edric Houston. Caden McDonald was a huge reason why Ohio State was able to get some of those goal line stands they got last year. So I honestly think going into the season, Caden McDonald could be one of the best, if not the best, defensive tackles in the Big Ten next year. His thing is he has to have the stamina for it, right? It's a lot like, what's his name? Kenneth Grant from Michigan last year. Everybody knew how good he was. He just had to have the stamina to stay out there on the field the entire time. And I think that's what you're going to kind of look for with Caden McDonald is he going to be able to stay out there on the field enough to actually continue to influence the game the way that you hope he would for the entire time.
Cool. All right, we'll move right to the linebacker. Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles are fantastic players. You must have high expectations for the linebacker room this year. And do you see anybody else contributing much?
Yeah, so Arvell and Sonny Styles would be the two main guys. Sonny Styles more of kind of the pass rushing type. Arvell will play more of kind of the run stopper and stuff. I mean, he's going to pass rush too. Don't get me wrong, but he's going to be more the Mike in that situation. Peyton Pierce is a sophomore that you could see kind of take some time in the Mike role to release Arvell Reese to do some more of that pass rushing. They got two guys from recruiting, Riley Pettijohn and TJ Alford. Riley Pettijohn had numbers that were just as fast as Travion Henderson in high school. And he plays linebacker, and he's bigger. So now, these were also numbers from Travion Henderson when he was a junior, because I think 2020 was like his senior year or something, so they didn't really get super great numbers then, obviously. I mean, nothing super great was happening in 2020, let's be honest.
No.
So I we'll see what happens if those guys get some time, but from everything we hear, very high on the linebacker room for Ohio State this season. If it's not the best position group, it probably will be the second best position group between Sonny Styles and, I mean, there's a lot of people that think Arvell Reese is going to be like one of the best linebackers in the nation. We'll see. I got to see it first, but when he came in relief last year, he was very good. We'll see if he can do it for the entire game.
That's really exciting. All right, now, well, that brings us to the secondary, and not only does Ohio State have the best offensive player in college football in Jeremiah Smith at wide receiver, but in safety, Caleb Downs, you have probably the best defensive player in college football. You also have Malik Hartford at the other safety, who's very good. At corner, it looks like Davison Igbinosun. Yep, Igbinosun. I said it right before I thought about it, and then I thought about it, and that was a mistake. I just got to roll. Jermaine Matthews and the nickelback Lorenzo Styles. Does that sound right, or do you have anyone else penciled in? And then my question about Igbinosun. See, I did practice it. He had issues with penalties at times last year, specifically holding too much. Do you think he's been cured of that problem, or is it something where you just learn to live with the occasional penalty?
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Igbinosun. They made him practice with oven mitts last year, and honestly, when that was happening, it felt like that was when he was playing his best football. So I feel like Matt Patricia, with all the experience he has to have seen something like this before and have an answer for it. But he's got all the traits. I mean, he's got the size, the speed. He's got everything you want to play there. Jermaine Matthews, former freshman All-American. I do think he probably plays on the outside, but I would not be surprised if he moves in to the nickel spot and you see Devin Sanchez, freshman cornerback, out wide instead. He got paid a lot of money to come to Ohio State. I'm not in the business of saying numbers or anything like that, but if he was paid what I was told he was paid, he's playing this season. Like, you don't pay a guy that much money to just sit there for a season and then we'll get to you. That doesn't happen. And then Caleb Downs, very, very good safety. For my money, he's the second best player in college football. I've seen some people call him a 3. That's fine. He's top 3 at the very least in college football, and he's going to be spectacular this season. The question mark is that other safety position, Malik Hartford or Jalen McClain. It could be either one of them. Malik Hartford did play a lot as a freshman before Caleb Downs got there a couple years ago. But Jalen McClain, he is somebody that the staff and people are very high on as well. Very hard worker, does a lot of the things the way you want it to be done. I would not be surprised at all if we see a good mix of Malik Hartford and Jalen McClain out there, or if we see one of them possibly get some time at the nickel too.
Sure. Interesting. All good stuff. Just briefly with the specialists, obviously we've got Jaden Feeling back at kicker. He played through some injuries last year, was a little up and down. Joe McGuire is a solid but maybe unspectacular punter. And then you've got potentially Caleb Downs returning punts, which would be absolutely electric. So do you think the specialist will be a strength or a potential liability for Ohio State this year?
I always say special teams for Ohio State is probably not going to be good under Ryan Day. That's kind of the MO that he's had this entire time. Now, they do have a special teams coordinator this year, so maybe things get better with that. It's Rob Keys. He was kind of the quality control special teams guy the past year or two, but the last time we had a special teams coordinator, his name was Parker Fleming. And if you say Parker Fleming in Columbus, Ohio, it's like a cuss word with how much people didn't like him. So We'll see what happens. I am higher on the kicker this year. They brought in, what's the guy's name? He came in from Miami of Ohio or something like that, I think.
Oh yeah.
He kicks like 50-yard field goals, and that's something that Ohio State fans have been begging for
Sure.
with Jaden Fielding. I think he's attempted maybe a couple, but he's never hit a 50-yard field goal in his career, and people want to see some of that. And if maybe Jaden Fielding is a close range guy, and maybe the other guy is a long range guy, we'll see what happens. But I know people are excited about that. We'll see what happens with special teams.
Sure.
All right, JR, you've been generous with your time. Do you need to run right now, or do you have time to play the schedule game with us?
We can do the schedule. Let's do it.
Okay. Love the schedule game. We'll bring it up. Ohio State's 2025 schedule. And I gotta say, I cannot wait. And I'm actually trying to talk friend of the pod, Phil, into a trip to Columbus. It would be I've gone to a game in the shoe, JR. I won't tell you which one because it was in 2022, and I'll let you guess. But
I got it.
But anyway, that Texas game is the biggest game of Labor Day weekend. It's the first full weekend back in college football. You've got Texas versus Ohio State returning national champions, Texas returning playoff team. You've got Ryan Day and Steve Sarkisian. You've got Lee Corzo's last gasp on game day before we never have to watch College Game Day ever again. And yeah, what are you thinking about that Texas game?
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. I wish it was a night game.
Yeah,
that's my only wish. No, I think it's gonna be fantastic. I think that there's a lot of people really high on Texas this season, and so I've seen a lot of people just kind of assume that Texas is gonna come in and just win against Ohio State. I mean, I don't know. Both teams are starting new quarterbacks. I know Arch Manning's played against a couple Group of 5 teams, but I don't think you playing against, San Jose State is anything like trying to go into the horseshoe and play Ohio State. And not that I'm proud of it or anything, but he did get rocked pretty hard in that not Peach Bowl, whatever it was, bowl game, Cotton Bowl, when the safety hit him in that game, and he nearly fumbled the ball. So I do think that is going to be a game where Ohio State's defenses really have to show themselves, and Matt Patricia really have to do some interesting stuff to confuse Arch Manning, and we'll see what the running game looks like for Texas too. They have a really good running back duo there, and Baxter, and then I'm forgetting the other guy's name, Welcher or something like that. But that's going to be a really good duo there at Texas. So we'll see what happens. I lean Ohio State because of the home field advantage. I think that the mystery of the defense and what Matt Patricia is going to run out there too is an advantage, since pretty much the entire Texas staff is the same. So Ryan Day and those guys have seen what Texas's defense is going to deploy, but they're not going to know what Matt Patricia is going to do with the defense. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, it'll be a great game, and I think both teams are legit national title contenders. It'll be interesting to me. I think it's really key that you have the continuity at linebacker and in the secondary, because Steve Sarkisian never saw a screen pass he didn't want to exploit. So I feel like, especially in the first game of the year, it's going to be a parade of screen passes, and can you stop that or not? And, you saw that last year, and, Ohio State was largely able to do it. I will note for all the SEC fans out there, the Buckeyes are a 3.5 point favorite. So I think Ohio State's going to win this game. I was sold on Julian Sayin in the spring game. I know there's somewhat of a battle, but I just thought that guy's the next great Buckeye quarterback. And I just think, if he outduels Arch Manning, we could see some Heisman hype. So there's a lot on the line.
Yeah, I totally agree. And back to the Big Ten SEC thing, like if you're a Big Ten fan, I get it. If you're a Michigan fan, I get it. If you're a Penn State fan, like I understand you don't want to root for the Buckeyes in this one, but if you're a Big Ten fan, like you got to be rooting for Ohio State in this one. You got to be rooting for the Buckeyes to take down the SEC once again, because they've been popping their mouths off this entire offseason. And Michigan and Oklahoma, that's going to be a good game. Let's be honest. Wisconsin, probably not going to beat Alabama. That's very unlikely. I mean, it was very unlikely that Oklahoma would beat them last year too, so we'll see what happens. But as far as I'm concerned, this is the game that it really means a lot for the Big Ten SEC battle going into next season.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. John, do you have any thoughts on this game before we move on?
No, I mean, it's going to be amazing. And what a great way to kick off the season, really.
Yeah, I'm desperate to attend. Going to one game in the shoe was not enough. I want to be there where there's a celebration after the game, not just before. So that's why I'm trying to get to this one, because I do think Ohio State's going to win that game. So let's say you do win that, that'll vault you up the polls. You'll already be in a high spot. That'll be a huge boost. You've got Grambling. All respect to HBCUs. We don't need to talk much about Grambling. Ohio U, a very tough MAC team. But again, these are the Buckeyes. They are the most talented team in the Big Ten, arguably the most talented team in the country. So I got to imagine you think those two will be pretty comfortable wins.
Yeah, Buckeyes beating Bobcats all day, every day.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's an in-state thing. So I can see where there's probably some grudge on that both sides. But yeah, so we get to 3-0. And then I think, honestly, the sneakiest part about the Buckeyes this year is that you get that bye week before you have to go to Washington, because Washington's a sneaky team this year. Jonah Coleman and Boston and Damon Williams. Oh man, they're gonna be a challenging offense. But I just think with 2 weeks to get ready, I think that's just gonna be tough for Washington to get the Buckeyes coming off that much preparation.
Yeah, Ryan Day is not historically good coming off the bye, which is interesting. So this Washington game is probably one of the keys to the season outside of, the big matchups. And I'm not trying to say Washington isn't a big matchup, but
no, but you mean outside of Penn State and Michigan.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, no disrespect for the Washington fans out there. On our podcast, I said Washington is a team that I think could make the playoffs and be a little bit of a dark horse to do that this season. So I'm high on Washington this season, which is one of the reasons why I think that, Ohio State needs to watch out. It's going to be Julian Saint's first road game. They have the second longest winning streak of all teams in college football at home. I mean, this is not going to be an easy game by any means. And if there are any Ohio State fans out there just thinking, oh yeah, we got Texas and then a few weeks, and then we're going to go a few months and get to Penn State, you got more games in there, and Washington being chief among them, that you got to be on the lookout for, because that team's hungry. Jed Fish has proven he's been able to put a good offense together, and if Matt Patricia isn't on his toes, they'll have some interesting things for him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a really important game for Ohio State season. I think that is a linchpin. But John, I think I'm going to assume the Buckeyes roll there and do get the job done.
I would assume as well. I could see it being a good game, but
yes,
second half, Buckeyes take over pretty much.
Yeah. So then we've got Minnesota, and the last time Minnesota beat Ohio State in the shoe, we were all still in school. That was 2001. Ron Johnson went ballistic. I watch that game once every year or two. Makes me feel good about myself. But that said, I really want to pick Minnesota to be super competitive in this game. But there's two problems. One, PJ Fleck he tries to beat everybody else, but I feel like against Ohio State, sometimes he's like, let's just get out of here healthy. And two, Drake Lindsey is a redshirt freshman walking into the shoe to play against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Mm-hmm. And I just think that this one has a recipe to get ugly in Ohio State's favor, I think.
Is this the second road game for Minnesota? Because they go to Cal.
Yeah, second road game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that's going to factor in Drake Lindsey. I think Drake Lindsey has a good opportunity. You guys were right on him. I kind of had some thoughts about maybe Zach Pyron could be the guy if they went with some more experience. But obviously Drake Lindsey threw that to bed. I mean, threw Zach Pyron right out of the club and said, "Get out of here! Nothing. We don't need you here." And they did that. So props to him. But I think Drake Lindsey could be a nice quarterback this season for Minnesota. Kind of be middle of the pack, maybe a little bit higher in the Big Ten. I think your majority of your offense probably going to come from Darius Taylor and AJ Turner. I don't think enough people are talking about AJ Turner.
Yeah.
And what he could be this season as well. So we'll see what happens there. But I think with a young quarterback like that, if Matt Patricia is who he's supposed to be, he should be able to take care of business in that.
Sure.
One.
Yeah.
Especially at home.
You should have Drake seeing some ghosts, I think, in that game. It'll be a learning experience. But there's a chance the Gophers are 5-1 coming out of that going to Nebraska. But that's the wrong podcast. We already previewed Minnesota. So let's get back to the next game. So we're assuming the Ohio State Buckeyes are going to be 5-0 heading into Champaign for another key game, I think. Playing against Illinois, a team with 16 starters back, a team with arguably the best returning quarterback in the Big Ten and Luke Altmaier, that's a really challenging road game right there, I think.
And don't forget the all-important Illabuk Trophy.
Yes, the Illabuk is on the line, and
Mm-hmm.
is this a Juice Williams situation where you're running into the right combination to make this? I'm not saying that. Look, I'm not picking Illinois to win this game, but I think this is a game, man. I think this is going to be a game. What do you think, JR?
Yeah, I think it's be a great game. I think that I'm a little bit less concerned about Illinois because I don't think they quite have the star power around their team like Washington does. The fact that Washington has Denzel Boston, Jonah
Sure.
Coleman, Damon Williams. I mean, Don't get me wrong. I love me some Luke Altmaier, but I think Luke Altmaier is more of the type of guy that's going to grind it out in a close, very physical game that is going to kind of put things together. Now, the thing that I will say could possibly impact the game and keep it, much closer than people might expect. And honestly, Illinois could win if this happens, is if that secondary just plays lights out all game. They get Julian Sayin throwing 3-4 interceptions in that one. And let's be honest, Illinois has a fantastic secondary.
Yes.
And Gabe Yakus is able to get some pressure on Julian Sayin. He's able to, throw some bad balls, and Xavier Scott and those guys are able to pick some off. I could see it being a very good game for Illinois. But we'll see. It's a tough road game.
Yeah, we did our Illinois preview with Big Kurt from Eyes on Big, and he I didn't realize Illinois doesn't just have the 5 starters back; they have their top 8 defensive backs back. So they are going to be a really tough secondary, and that might be a game where I see Ryan Day wanting to run the ball a little more, and establish that and work from there. But then okay, so we're going to assume the Buckeyes roll on undefeated, John, unless you think Illinois wins that game.
I look, I'm not at this point in time. I'm not going to say that Ohio State loses any game. At this point in the schedule game, for sure.
Yes. Okay. Then we move on to, I'd say, obviously the most important thing for Buckeye fans is to beat Michigan this year, I believe.
Yeah.
But I think this game against Penn State is going to be the most important one when it comes to the Big Ten and the national title race.
We talking about Wisconsin yet?
Oh, I was going to skip them because they're so bad. But yeah, we should talk about them quick. Give them a thought on Wisconsin. You do have to go to Camp Randall, so that is always a little tough.
Yeah, they did have a hard time at Camp Randall last time with Kyle McCord as the quarterback, and that is a very tough place to play. We'll see.
Yes.
It'd be nice if Fox drafts that game and makes it a noon game for us. Help us out here, Fox. All right, but I don't envision that happening. I think it'll probably be a CBS or an NBC game.
Sure.
But I do think that you could have a little bit of what happened to Oregon last year happen in this one. I mean, you got 3 road games here in 4 weeks for the Buckeyes. You could possibly see a scenario here. And I don't think Luke Fickell's the kind of coach that's just going to lose all these big games. He's going to get 1 or 2 of these big games, I think. As much as Wisconsin is probably not going to have the best season in the world, I do think they're probably going to make a bowl game, and they're probably going to get 1 or 2 of these big wins that helps kind of solidify Luke Fickell's coming back next year. Now, those 2 wins might be Illinois and Indiana, or they could be Ohio State and Michigan. We'll see. But I do think that Luke Fickell's going to get those guys up and playing well. And like I said, Camp Randall, it's a tough place to play, whether people realize it or not.
Yeah,
for sure. I think that's very respectful. I think Billy Edwards is going to be throwing you lollipops by the end of that one.
And that's possible too. I mean,
that's what I think.
Yeah, it's possible too.
I think Caleb Downs is going to have a fantastic day.
Yeah. So we'll see. I do like that you respect Wisconsin that much. I respect them that much against Minnesota. I don't respect them that much against Ohio State.
Yes.
I'll be honest.
Yes.
Then you get a bye, another key bye to get ready for Penn State. And that's, like I was saying, it's kind of the game of the year in the Big Ten to me going into the year, because Penn State was right there, made the semifinal last year, nearly won the Big Ten title, nearly played for a national title, and Ohio State coming back as the reigning national champions. I mean, Penn State's got it all. They've got the experience. They've got the talent. They've got the pedigree. They've got the highest paid set of coordinators in the country. The question for me is, who is Drew Aller really? And I think we're going to find out against Ohio State. And this is going to be one of the games where we find out who Drew Aller is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot on the line here for the Ohio State coaching staff, right? Jim Knowles, everything going on there, and kind of that drama. I mean, we said how I thought about Jim Knowles, but
Jim Knowles, who for people who don't know was Ohio State's defensive coordinator for the national title, but then took a bag and ran to coach for Penn State.
Yeah. And but the other part of this too is like Drew Aller, he's an Ohio kid. He is somebody that Ohio State didn't try to sign until very late in the cycle. And you know, when you're a 5-star quarterback like Drew Aller, you don't take such a liking to that, right? There's just some dudes from Ohio that don't like it when Ohio State doesn't go after him, and that's kind of what it felt like for Drew Aller. This will be his last chance to kind of stick it to Ohio State. We saw Will Howard last year. He had the motivation of like Penn State didn't want me and everything else, and then he had his trash talk after the game. So could we see something like that with Drew Aller? It'll be interesting. I'll tell you though, I'm much more concerned about that offensive line for Penn State than I am Drew Aller himself. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to disrespect Drew Aller, but I think that offensive line for Penn State is going to be very good this season. And if Zariah Fisher and Caleb Artis can be difference makers for Penn State, not even difference makers, but just good, healthy pieces for that defensive line, this could be one of the best offensive line, defensive line duos in the country. I mean, they have denied Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, two very good players coming back. We'll just have to see what the next two guys look like, and that could give Ohio State issues if Penn State wins the line of scrimmage in that one.
Yeah, and Penn State has arguably the best pair of running backs in the country in Singleton and Allen back once again, who could have gone pro, both of them, but decided to come back for one last run, a la what Ohio State did with a lot of their NFL draft eligible guys last year and Michigan the year before, and you know what we're saying. So I'm coming out. This is a true coin flip to me. I can't pick a winner or a loser, so I've got Ohio State either undefeated or with one loss after Penn State. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm getting the same feeling right now with Penn State. I need to see Aller take that next step, though. And if it looks like he is at this point in the season, then, I may be leaning more Penn State. But again, this is like you said with Julian saying too, like where are the quarterbacks? I think that's where I'm at with this, because both I think have the capability of beating each other at this point, but it's going to be health and the level of quarterback play at this point.
For sure. JR, I know you have limited time, so let's take the next three as in one conversation. You've got at Purdue, then UCLA, then Rutgers. Now, Purdue should be more competitive this year, but at the same time, they got rated in the portal. They're starting over again. I can't imagine that's going to be a very competitive game. I think the Buckeyes roll there. UCLA should be a little better. Rutgers is kind of, I'm not sure what to expect from Rutgers, honestly. I think they're going to run the ball well, but, can they replace Kyle Monangai? Is the defense where they want it to be? I don't know. What do you think? Are any of those games concerns to you at all, JR, going into them?
With all due respect, no, not really. I kind of have one thought for each game. At Purdue, they don't have Rondale Moore, so I'm not nearly as terrified of them as I would be years ago.
Fair.
UCLA, that's probably going to be Ohio State's only night game in the shoe. We saw what happened when Nico came to the shoe at night last time, so not saying it's going to be a repeat, but UCLA doesn't necessarily have the structure around Nico that Tennessee did, and so I'm not as concerned about that one. And then Rutgers, I got all kinds of respect for Greg Schiano. He's going to try to pull out, he's going to try to pull a rabbit out of the hat. He's going to try to throw anything he can out there. As long as Ohio State stays disciplined, though, they should take care of Rutgers, no problem.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think those are three pretty clear wins. John, what you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the reason I wore this hat, JR, is because I was at that 2022 Michigan game and I was ready to celebrate so hard, and then it just kind of didn't happen. And if you could have told me, I would have never guessed that Ryan Day would lose two more and still keep his job. But here we are. He won the national title. He's the winningest coach percentage-wise in college football. He's doing a great job. The only problem Ryan Day has really in his whole life, it seems like, is he's got to figure out how to beat Michigan. And I got to believe with a true freshman quarterback this year in Bryce Underwood, Ohio State's fans have to want this one badly. And I got to think Ohio State's gotten a little bit of an advantage just because Bryce Underwood is a true freshman. And that's hard to do, to come in and play as that young a player at that position.
Yeah, I think, I said on my last episode of the Big Ten Huddle, I said, look, Ohio State should win against Michigan, but I'm not going to pick them to beat Michigan until it happens. I mean, they
Sure.
should do it. Like, that's going to be my caveat. They should do it, but you can't pick it to happen because you saw what happened last year when Ohio State was a 20-point favorite at home and they still lost that one. So we'll see how it plays out. Ohio State has everything they need. Bryce Underwood, young quarterback. We'll see what happens. I don't think the sanctions are going to be huge for Michigan, but if something happens and Sharon Moore isn't coaching, do they just lose all the competitive edge that they've had under Harbaugh and Moore these past few years? I don't know. We'll see what happens, but at the end of the day, Ohio State has the talent. They have the players. Ryan Day should be able to get this done. But he bought himself a few more years, even if he loses to Michigan every time, because he won a national championship. The Ohio State faithful will be upset if they lose again, but it won't be nearly what it was last year.
Well, that was our whole thing last year when we were talking about Ryan Day and Ohio State. We were like, after the loss of Michigan, especially, we were like, he has to win a national title. Like, I mean, like otherwise he'd be gone. I mean, we were convinced anyways that he would have been fired if he had not won a national title. So he saved it. He did a great job. It was a team of destiny. Like you said, we saw it after Tennessee, and then of course it was just solidified after Oregon, and that was game over in my opinion from there on out.
What I will say, what jumps out at me, gentlemen, is we just did this, and we have Ohio State between 10-2 and 12-0. So it looks like another playoff year for the Buckeyes.
For
and
sure,
they're going to have a real chance to defend their title. And JR, that's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think at this point, all Ohio State has to do is just make the playoffs. We saw what happened last year when they, kind of turn up and really get going, really get into it. So I don't want to say anything for sure, like, oh, they definitely win it or anything like that. I'm not that big of a homer, but I do think Ohio State is not a team anybody's going to want to see in the playoffs. That's not a team that, anybody is going to be like, oh, yeah, we'll take them first round. That's going to be a team where if they have 2 losses and you're the 9th seed and they're the 8th seed, you're like, gosh
like, how did that happen?
I got Ole Miss.
Yeah. All right. Well, JR, you've been more than generous with your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know you said it went a little long. Apologize for infringing. I know you got to get to your parenting and your podcast duties, but please just let everybody know one more time where they can find you. And in this episode, we will have the Big Ten Huddle, and we'll have JR's site linked so you can all go to it and start watching yourself if you're not already.
Yeah, no sweat, guys. Just appreciate you having me on. The Big Ten Huddle, YouTube, podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all those different places. You can go find us there. At JRs_rankings on Twitter. Give some thoughts there. Mostly Ohio State, but I do, try to have some funny replies under, making fun of SEC teams and stuff like that. So if you like that, you'll enjoy a little bit there too. But yeah, no, love the podcast, guys. I don't get to listen to every episode all the way through every time, but I do listen to you guys, and you guys do a great job. So I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thanks, JR. And I, you know me, I'm always in the chat on your podcast because you guys do a lot of live episodes, which is something we got to start doing too. But yeah, so yeah, check out JR. They check out all his stuff. It's a lot of fun. Thanks so much, JR, and have an awesome evening.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was great. That was fantastic. I think it moved along pretty well. I know we may have gone a little bit over, but
I did. JR told me he had a hard out at 75 minutes.
Yeah.
And he stayed for an hour 25.
Yes.
So that was really generous of him to do that. Yeah. We really appreciate it, JR. I gave him an out before the schedule game. I was like, hey, if you got to go, you can go. And he was like, no, because, everybody wants to play the schedule game.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and it was more fun to have him than for us just to play it ourselves.
Yeah. No, it was great. He's a great interview. He's so knowledgeable about all things Ohio State and everything
and the whole Big Ten.
Exactly.
JR covers the whole league, and unlike a lot of podcasts who say they cover all the teams, you come to this podcast because we cover all the Big Ten teams, all 18 of them, and JR does the same thing.
Yep. Yeah.
And sometimes, he is a Buckeye fan, but he covers all 18 teams in the league. And I give him a lot of credit for that because most the Helmet School fans out there are not covering the whole league.
Yeah. No, we appreciate what he does. Obviously they're doing a great job over there. Him and Zach. Also want to give him a shout out. Zach Guggenheim. Also great job. So Yeah, fun podcast, fun to listen to, very informative. Please go out there, check him out. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, I know we could have gone on a lot of other subjects and talked a lot about things, but I felt like, we kept it pretty tight in the beginning,
Yep.
and we're able to roll along through that. And of course, I would have loved to engage in more, SEC hatred, but
Oh man, we could have ranted all day about the SEC. We could have
Yeah.
ranted all day.
Yes, we could.
And the three of us, and we could have filled an hour and a half, and then we wouldn't have talked about Ohio State at all.
Exactly.
So that would have happened. But what I'm
Yeah.
struck at, but let's before we close out, let's talk a little bit, man. Here's what I'm struck with. Going in the last year, there was a big question about the Ohio State offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, it's the defensive line.
Yeah.
And the offensive line we feel really good about. And I just think with those receivers and a great offensive line and Max Clare at tight end, and man, I watched that Ohio State spring game, and Julian Sayin, I think, is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I was really impressed with what he did. I mean, he throws it effortlessly. He's got a cannon. It's just, he's really accurate. I don't know, man. The Buckeyes, I'm already dreading that trip to the shoe that Minnesota has to make. I'm already dreading it. I can already hear PJ tamping down expectations going into the game.
Well, here's the only thing, and I know this is at the Horseshoe,
man.
so this is a totally different scenario in a lot of ways. But like the last time you saw PJ try to beat Ohio State was when we had Mohamed Ibrahim, and it was the game where we were ahead.
We were ahead before Mo got hurt, yeah.
And Mo was running all over their defense.
Yeah. Or I don't know if we were ahead, but it was like a one-score game.
Oh yeah, well I think we were ahead going into the half, and then
we were ahead at half.
Yeah.
And when we had the ball, I think down a score, and
Yeah.
Mo was running wild. It looked
Yep.
like he couldn't be stopped. It was CJ Stroud's first game, and he looked a little shaky in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second half came, and Mo got hurt, and more importantly, we had a safety get hurt, and Ryan Day saw it right away.
Yeah, he did.
He saw it, and he's like, "We're going at that guy."
And it was
at the replacement, and the replacement was not up to par. We won't say his name, but the replacement was not up to par. He was a try-hard type, and that's not going to work against the Buckeyes. And that was, and John, here's what's scary. That was a significantly, I think, probably less talented team than they have now.
Well, and that's just it. That's kind of what I'm thinking is like we do have more talent, and as far as just this is not me predicting a win for the Gophers at all, but it's. We talked about how PJ.
No, I'm saying the Buckeyes have more talent than they did then.
Oh yeah,
Minnesota I think does too.
I think
the Buckeyes are even more talented than they were then.
Yeah. But I think what I'm wondering is if PJ might actually try to win at least for a while longer than he usually does.
Well, now if he thinks he can make the playoff.
Yeah. Well, and he trusted Mo. Like he trusted Mo, and now he trusts Darius.
That's true. He does trust
Darius.
So
I think like if he has guys like that he feels like he can trust and he can push a little harder, he will. And so at least if nothing else, I hope to just see it more competitive than just. But
man, at some point he's gonna have Drake Lindsay seeing ghosts out there.
Oh yeah.
I can already see Caleb Downs holding the ball in the air as he runs into the end zone out of pick six. I'm just not getting my hopes up for that game.
Oh no. Me
like
neither.
not at all.
No.
But man, I really think I said it before. I'm going to say it again. The game of the year is Ohio State, Penn State.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I've been picking Penn State to win the national title, but like, I know the Oregon game matters, but Oregon isn't the team that Penn State fans lay awake at night thinking about.
Mm-mm.
Oregon isn't the team that's tormented them for the last since they joined the Big Ten.
What, 93? Yeah.
Since the 90, what was it, the 4 season when they went undefeated? Penn State did.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, it's Ohio State.
Yeah,
Ohio State is the team. Ohio State is the team that haunts their dreams. Ohio State is the team that Drew Aller and Denai Dennis Sutton and Katron Allen and Nick Singleton came back to beat. Ohio State is the team they paid all those those coordinators so much money for and paid Trevor Pena from Syracuse a ton of money because they needed a number one receiver and all that stuff. That's the game that they all came back for. Can they win it? Or is it going to be the Buckeyes once again? And it's one of those things, John, where I want to be able to pick Penn State in that game, but man, I just have a hard time picking against the Buckeyes in big games.
Same. And, we know, again, even though James Franklin has gotten over in a way, losing big games, he still does have some bad tendencies that you just can't trust at this point until I see him pull something off against a team like if they beat Ohio State or Oregon, then I'm going to believe a lot more in James Franklin. But yeah, I agree. I think Ohio State's the key.
I mean, Ohio State, not only are they national title contenders, but they play Texas and Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
And those teams are hardcore national title contenders. So
absolutely.
So much is going to come down to who wins those two games.
Yep.
And if the Buckeyes, go 1-1 or 2-0 in those games, they could be on their way to another shot at, another national championship. Mm-hmm. We could be talking about the back-to-back. Man, imagine if Ryan Day wins back-to-back national titles.
Yeah.
It could happen.
It could.
And Jeremiah Smith, what are you going to do about their receivers? What do you do about it? Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes, and now you got Max Clare in tight end. And I was like, oh, Emeka Egbuka was in the slot all the time. Who's going to be in the slot now? Well, it's going to be Max Clare.
Yeah.
That's who's going to be in the slot now.
I don't know how you defend that. I know that it'll be fun watching Minnesota's secondary play against them and Illinois and all that, some good secondaries, but eventually they wear you down. And they
wear you down, man.
They're going to get open and they're going to score. That's just the way it's going to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they repeat. I wouldn't.
Even a little bit.
No,
not even a little bit. If Ohio State if you told me tomorrow Ohio State's gonna, or in the, at 4 a.m. if you woke me up and said Ohio State's gonna win the national championship, I'd shrug my shoulders and go back to bed.
Yep, exactly.
It wouldn't be. Whereas if you told me Penn State was gonna win, I'd be like, oh, cool. Yeah. That's crazy. That's new. That's different. That's something I have to think about. But Ohio State winning another title, nah, man.
Yeah.
I just expect that.
Yeah.
That's the place they have. They are the 800-pound gorilla in the Big Ten. They are, in my opinion, the best program in college football, bar none. Period.
I agree. Yeah.
And have been for basically our entire lives.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I don't know. That was a good episode. Anything
it was really fun.
Anything you want to hit on? I think that's it. I don't think
No, man. I just think, if you're a Buckeye fan, must be fun.
Yep.
Must be fun. But please check us out. If you're new Buckeye fans, we're happy to have you on board. We are previewing all the Big Ten teams so we can get you ready for not just the Buckeyes, but all of your upcoming opponents and everybody else in the Big Ten. So check that out as well. And, welcome aboard. And, thank you so much for checking out the pod. And, we hope you enjoy what you see.
Yeah. And before we head out, if you do want to find us, you can find us. If you want to find We Live for Saturday, which is the name of our podcast, of course, you can find some of those other I think we covered Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota
so far. And now Ohio State.
Yep. Now Ohio State. But you can find those on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike here at Alibaba26, and you can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can also email us, we live for Saturday, b1g@gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, please follow, retweet, especially on YouTube. We would really appreciate that. We're trying to grow
so if you're an audio only listener, please go to YouTube and subscribe. That is the best thing you can do to help our show grow right now, is to subscribe to us on YouTube. So please do that. We really appreciate it. And we will give you all the awesome content for free. And hey, because we're not monetized yet, we don't have any commercials. So there you go. All right. Well, thank you so much for rocking with us. This was a lot of fun, John. It was great to have JR on.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Always great to talk to him. And we will see you all in the next one. We have a really exciting bunch of guests coming on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to want to miss it. Especially, we talked about Penn State a lot. Our Penn State guest is going to be pretty special. So get excited. That's going to be coming up in the next few weeks too. And we will see you in the next one.